The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. It is Friday, the 20th of March, 2026. We're live here at CHD TV. We have a great show for you, a very important show for you this morning. So in a second, Karl Jablonowski will be on to talk about the CDC burying COVID vaccine death data. Then Michael Caine will be on live with Christina, Hildebrand and Karen Amigon to talk about testifying for religious liberty. And then we'll have Brian Hooker, healing for type 1 diabetes with his Doctors and Scientists show. So without further ado, let's go straight to Karl Jablonowski. Good morning, Karl.
Good morning, Polly.
What do you have for us today?
Well, when I first started at Children's Health Defense, 2 weeks later, the CDC published in Lancet Infectious Disease a safety study in March of 2022. At that time, America was weighing whether or not to get a booster or perhaps a second booster dose. They had to weigh what the Trusted News Initiative was telling us, safe and effective. Is it really 95% effective if we still get sick and need a booster every few months? Could the sudden surge of people dying suddenly have anything to do with vaccine safety? If the COVID-19 vaccines underwent the most intensive safety analysis in U.S. history, why did it take months to relay the myocarditis risk, months after Israel told the CDC about that risk? About this paper, I have never cared about the declaration of interests. I automatically assume everyone has a conflict. There is just too much money floating around, and academics operate on a publish or perish paradigm. The paper, however, states we have no competing interests. Every one of the 14 authors is a CDC employee, part of the COVID-19 response team. They are writing about VAERS and vSafe, both administered by the CDC, monitoring products from Pfizer and Moderna, both financially entangled with the CDC, their vaccines specifically, which are both recommended by the CDC. A conflict of interest exists when one interest, for example, employment, duty, finances, reputation, is in conflict with another interest, for example, publishing an unbiased research article. Beyond that, one of the authors, Dr. Tom Shimabukuro, has been referred by U.S. Senator Ron Johnson to the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the Inspector General at HHS for allegedly deleting or destroying agency records and communications pertaining to COVID-19 vaccine adverse events. About the paper, in short, the authors analyzed VAERS and vSafe. CDC physicians reviewed VAERS reports and available death certificates, categorized them into 15 most common diagnoses, and found no unusual pattern in cause of death. That sounds great, but I don't know what the CDC thinks a pattern in cause of death is. What do they think a usual pattern is or an unusual pattern, and how does the CDC tell the difference? The CDC did not feel that was important information to include in the manuscript. They placed death certificate analysis where few people would look, in Supplemental Table 2. From that table, I can see, not surprisingly, that unknown or unclear causes of death usually did not come with a death certificate. It looks like Pfizer recipients were more likely to die from COVID-19 than Moderna recipients. And there is a large portion attributed to diseases of the heart, but the paper's own limitation noted that death certificates may document that as such if no immediate explanation of death was available. Now, in their discussion, the authors write, quote, "The concentrated reporting of deaths on the first few days after vaccination follows patterns similar to those observed for other adult vaccinations." They then write what is one of the worst lines the CDC has ever written, but I will get to that in a second. What is the concentrated reporting of deaths that is similar to other patterns? The authors don't show you, so I plotted both curves myself. They are both exponentially decaying curves. But the blue curve, representing post-COVID vaccination, decays slower than the red curve, representing pre-COVID adult vaccinations. This means that there are consistently more mortality reports for the COVID vaccine than anyone would have expected. And it's not like the authors didn't know how to plot these curves, as they did it for 6 clinically insignificant conditions that no one cares about. The only figure in the paper is a time series comparison for both Moderna and Pfizer for both dose 1 and dose 2 of injection site pain, fatigue, headache, myalgia, chills, and joint pain. Back to one of the worst lines the CDC ever wrote. After they wrote, the concentrated reporting of deaths on the first few days after vaccination follows patterns similar to those observed for other adult vaccinations. They wrote, quote, "This pattern might represent reporting bias because the likelihood to report a serious adverse event might increase when it occurs in close temporal proximity to vaccination." This is the CDC saying that theirs, which they administer, is nothing more than a collection of reporting bias. They do not take it or the human suffering each report represents seriously. The authors concluded that they will continue to provide data needed to inform policy. I read that and was like, please do not inform policy from this paper. But that is exactly what happened. 2 months after this publication, it was cited by the COVID-19 Vaccine Safety Technical Work Group to ACIP as supporting, quote, "no unusual clustering of causes of death associated with U.S. authorized COVID-19 vaccines. No critical reader would have that takeaway." Later that day, ACIP voted overwhelmingly to recommend the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 booster shot to children aged 5 and 11. The lone dissenting vote was Dr. Talbot, who was quoted by NBC News. Could it not be that their original exposure and 2 doses would give them the full immunity that we're looking at? The Infectious Disease Society of America, the organization that takes your tax dollars to convince you to get more vaccines, has an Anthony Fauci Courage in Leadership Award. The awardees are Peter Hotez, Rochelle Walensky, and last year it went to Dr. Talbot. You would think that when even the champion of vaccines says enough is enough, that maybe we should listen, but we didn't, and a lot of people got hurt. Our update would end there if not for the amazing work of Risa Evans and the CHD legal department. Last week, we received a Freedom of Information Act document from HHS that included a previous version of this paper, which explains a lot. This paper was originally slated to include empirical Bayesian data mining alerts. This data mining is what the FDA relied upon for pharmacovigilance after releasing a pathetically tested vaccine onto the country. Dr. Brian Hooker, Risa Evans, and myself detailed it in a publication at the European Society of Medicine entitled "The Pharmacovigilance Betrayal of the COVID-19 Era." In essence, the FDA and CDC were supposed to run parallel and distinct monitoring programs. In violation of their own standard operating procedures, the CDC did not. It relied on the FDA's, quote, "because it is a more robust data mining technique." Now, for all FDA monitoring, they found merely 3 clinically relevant signals of mRNA vaccines: a rash, drug ineffective, no kidding, and exposure via breast milk. Horrific, but that hardly captures our experiences. The CDC did eventually turn on their monitoring program for 4 short months, and when they did, 743 distinct clinical safety signals, including death, stroke, heavy menstrual bleeding, and myocarditis. That program first started reporting on March 25th, which is 18 days after this paper was published, but well before the ACIP meeting that approved the booster dose to 5 and 11-year-olds. In this paper, the data mining would have shown 5 signals: 3 product administration preparation issues, and 2 vague flags for investigation and weight, I assume body weight. But the FDA's data mining was stripped out of this paper. One of the authors, John Su, received an email from who, we don't know, redacted, relaying an excerpt from the manuscript, quote, disproportionality scores can be muted, particularly if both mRNA COVID-19 vaccines are associated with the same adverse event. They end the email with, thought it might be helpful to share this manuscript update with you, especially if folks on your end may be placing excess value on data mining alerts or the absence of specific data mining alerts. That is a great summary as to why, if both COVID vaccines cause the same adverse events, the FDA's safety monitoring will miss it, like death, stroke, heavy menstrual bleeding, and myocarditis, all missed by the FDA. This email was sent on September 22nd, 2021. That's 12 short days after Biden proclaimed vaccines to be safe, described a pandemic of the unvaccinated, stated the obvious, this is not about freedom or personal choice, and then threatened everyone who would think otherwise with, our patience is wearing thin. But with this draft version, it suddenly makes sense why this was a horrible and discombobulated paper. The published version was severely edited to de-emphasize death and adverse events of a paper on death and adverse events. The first 4 words of the title changed from reactogenicity and adverse events to safety of mRNA vaccines. The first author added a comment, note, all death results interpretations have been removed from the abstract, yet 1.3% of VAERS reports as death was still left in, so she's referring to something else. The first figure was going to be percent distribution of the 10 leading causes of death and was deleted from the manuscript. Table 4 was going to be the most common causes of death, but was pushed to supplemental table 2, where it was sure to be read by very few. But what really clarifies a lot was that table 5, observed death versus expected death, was deleted from the paper. Finally, we are presented data that allows us to compare the death rate associated with vaccination. There are 2 major things wrong with this table. Beyond the wrong label, beyond the brazen assumption that everyone got 2 doses, and beyond the totals death rate row being just all wrong, these are, believe it or not, the little things wrong with this table. One major problem with this table is that it shows the death rate difference between 2 vaccines. Per dose administered, Pfizer had a higher death rate in the 16 to 34-year-old group in both 7-day window and the 42-day window. That rate flips entirely for ages 45 and older, where deaths per dose was dominated by Moderna's vaccine. Perhaps if they left this table in, they would have had to field a question from ACIP to clarify what no unusual clustering means. The other major problem with this paper is reminiscent of the Ciapponi study, which was heralded by the New York Times as proof that the COVID vaccines are safe during pregnancy. It was a meta-analysis, a study of other studies. Not only did they not find an increase of bad outcomes, they saw a substantial decrease in bad pregnancy outcomes across the board, things that could not possibly be explainable by a vaccine. That is not safety. That is censorship. A naive reader may conclude from this study that the COVID-19 vaccine is the greatest obstetric innovation in modern medicine, greatly reducing pre-COVID-19 rates for hypertensive disorder, preterm births, and miscarriage, and making antenatal bleeding, fetal growth retardation, and neonatal death and stillbirths a thing of the past. But scientists couldn't write about a bad outcome and vaccine in the same paper. So, of course, the meta-analysis concluded that it found no evidence of safety concerns, where in fact it stands as a testament to the greatest scientific censorship campaign ever waged. This is relevant to the deleted table because the table is observed versus expected. They got their observations from VAERS and their expected death rate from the work of one of the authors, Winston Ibarra. They use vital death certificates from, vital death data from 2020 to estimate the background all-cause mortality rate, a time when COVID and hospital protocols were killing a lot of people, was set as the background. Against that exaggerated background, the drastically underreported reporting system shows only a tiny fraction of deaths. You would have to be naive in the extreme to believe that year one of a rapidly evolving virus would look anything like year two after all of our immune systems had already created antibodies against it, or that theirs was not underreporting. Again, one of the worst lines CDC ever wrote. This pattern might represent reporting bias because the likelihood to report a serious adverse event might increase when it occurs in close temporal proximity to vaccination. In a comment within the draft, a reviewer responded, "This reporting may also reflect a true event." That person did not make the final author list when it was published. As far as I can tell, all authors still work for CDC, most of them in the Immunization Safety Office. When ACIP next convenes their session on COVID vaccine injury, it is within their purview to ask a really important question of these authors. Why was it necessary to de-emphasize death in a CDC study on mortality associated with COVID vaccines? America really needs to hear that answer. The bereaved really need to hear that answer. The injured really need to hear that answer. Our children need to know that our institutions can fail us. Hopefully, that lesson is followed with a demonstration of what accountability looks like.
Karl Jablonowski, and thank you for that, exposing the corruption and bringing us the truth. Amazing work there from our science department. You are a senior research scientist, and I can't thank you enough for that work. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Polly.
All right. Well, look, now we're going to go to Michael Caine, and he has a very important show. One of my favorite people, Christina Hildebrand, is coming on in a minute. How exciting. Michael, I won't keep you any longer because I know time's of the essence, but I'm going to thank you also for being such an amazing director of advocacy for Children's Health Defence. You're doing sterling work there, and I know our viewers are following you diligently.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Polly. It's good to be here and gab for just a little bit. We used to do this a lot. We don't seem to cross paths as much anymore. So it's always great to have the baton tossed to me from the legendary Polly Tommy. Absolutely.
All right, Michael.
Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is of extreme importance to Children's Health Defense as an organization, to our nation. It's about religious liberty and as it relates to vaccination. The Religious Liberty Commission just had a meeting on religious freedom and healthcare. You see there the great Dr. Aaron Kheriaty was actually one of the individuals who spoke and gave a riveting testimony at the Religious Liberty Commission, but so did a number of people, especially mothers, gave some really important testimony. But perhaps the most important piece of testimony came from Riley. So we want to show that now. Let's show Riley right now.
It's all right. My daughter wanted to share something really quickly.
Good morning. My name is Riley Grace, and I pray to go to school like others.
So there's a young girl barred from school because of her family's sincerely held religious beliefs and the fact that it doesn't allow them to vaccinate their child. And she is barred from school in the state of California. Before I bring my guests on, now including Riley's mother, I want to show a letter that was written by Mary Holland. Mary Holland wrote an open letter to the Religious Liberty Commission talking about fired unvaccinated workers in New York City and also talking about children banned and barred from school, just like Riley is as well, too. She sent this letter to the Religious Liberty Commission, but also CC'd Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., AAG Harmeet Dillon, Senators Rand Paul, Ron Johnson, Ashley Moody, Bernie Moreno, Representative Greg Steube, who's been a real hero for us in this, and Dr. Ben Carson, who is the co-chair of the Religious Liberty Commission. So this is very, very important to us. We'll have a link in the show note to that letter so everybody could read, as well as the Defender report that we showed. And with that, I would like to bring on Karen, Amigon, and Christina Hildebrand. Karen, was the mother of Riley, who testified. You gave amazing testimony yourself as well too, and both of you are with the organization, fantastic organization out of California, a voice for choice advocacy, fighting for medical freedom, fighting for religious freedom. Karen, I mean, first off, Karen, I just want to say, how proud were you as a mother to see your daughter be able to deliver that so perfectly?
I feel so proud. First of all, thank you so much, Michael, for having me on. And I'm trying not to get emotional because it's been a very long journey for us. And it was such a proud moment. And she is the sweetest little girl. And to explain to her why she can't go to school. And we live near schools around us. And the hardest part is when she gets to watch those kids in the morning walk to school with their backpacks on, and they're excited to walk to school. And she asks me, well, Mom, why can't I go to school? And how do you explain that to a 7-year-old little girl? And so that moment was really a proud moment, but also hoping that the Religious Liberty Commission sees how our children are being impacted by laws like SB 277 here in California.
Yeah, that did really stick out for me in your testimony, Karen, talking about her seeing it, asking you the questions. Why can't I go to school? Attorney Aaron Siri has said, it's really stuck with me. There is no other group in the country that can be talked about the way unvaccinated kids especially are talked about, that can be discriminated against the way the unvaccinated are. And so many of us have this tied to our faith. Why don't you briefly talk about that a little bit? We have limited time here, so we couldn't show your entire testimony, but talk about your story, talk about what happened when Riley was first born, all of these things that were just so compelling in your testimony.
Yeah, thank you. And as a mom, this is something that's deeply personal to me. I hold sincere religious beliefs. My daughter was in the NICU for the first 2 months of her life. And during that time, I leaned into my faith and prayer. And it was through that faith and that prayer and research that led me not to vaccinate my daughter. And when it was time for her to go to school, I learned that here in California, after SB 277 passed in 2015, religious exemptions were eliminated for families like ours. And because of that, my daughter cannot access school based on our religious beliefs. And this has impacted our family a lot. She's now being homeschooled, and don't get me wrong, homeschooling has brought many blessings. I get to spend more time with her, and I get to be a little bit more involved with her teaching. But as a single mother that has to work full time here in California, that has also brought so many challenges, balancing full-time work, keeping our house afloat, and also staying on top of teaching my daughter. And like I mentioned earlier, to me, the hardest part has been explaining to her that she's not allowed to go to the school that she would be going to in her neighborhood because she is not vaccinated because of our religious beliefs. And those beliefs are a foundation to what I decide as her mom, and when it comes to her medical and physical health. And we're simply asking for our religious rights to be respected and for our children, for my child, to have that opportunity to go to school. Because right now, it feels like homeschooling was more of a forced option for us because we have no other options here in the state of California.
Yeah, I understand that so well. And I remember watching from New York in 2015 and 2016 the Disney World measles, end of the world, that then led to the religious exemption being repealed in California. And in New York, I swear to God, at the time, I said, thank God New York is not that dumb. I swear that's what I said, and that's what I thought. And then kind of in a response to the 2016 election of Donald Trump, we ended up with a supermajority in New York that we hadn't had before of the Democrats. And then 2019 came and New York got California'd. The exact same thing happened in New York, that our religious exemption to vaccination in New York was pulled as well too. And then everybody said, we started to say, they're coming for the adults next. And people told us we were crazy about that. I lost my job shortly after that when my religious exemption was denied for COVID. And you just see how these dominoes fall. Christina, you're the president of A Voice for Choice Advocacy. You're helping to lead litigation surrounding these issues. Why don't you talk a little bit about the litigation that you've put forth in California and walk us through where that's at now?
Sure, Michael. Thank you for having us on today. So A Voice for Choice Advocacy we have two lawsuits. One has to do with titer testing, which I'm not going to talk about today, but is on our website. The other one has to do with religious exemptions. So we are the organization in California that is sort of leading litigation, legislation, testimony. We're trying to really cover everything on the religious exemption aspect of K through 12 mandates, school mandates for vaccinations. Our lawsuit, we filed it 2 years ago, and at the time I was just like, okay, let's hurry this up. I'm a big believer things happen for a reason. There's, there are greater forces out there than us, and it has taken two and a half years to get to where we are, but we're in a perfect position for it to go up to SCOTUS at this point. And so, we are currently in the Ninth Circuit, waiting for obviously the other side tried to dismiss it. The lower courts weren't surprised, said yes, it could be dismissed. In California, that was not a surprise. We were expecting that. We are in the Ninth Circuit, and what's interesting, and I know we've talked about this, but others on your show have talked about this, but in New York, you had the Amish case, the Miller versus McDonald case, that went up to SCOTUS and was told to come back down again to the Second Circuit based on Mahmoud versus Taylor ruling. That Mahmoud versus Taylor was a parental rights, religious based on sex education, that parents should have the right, and we weren't sure whether that was going to apply to vaccination cases. And so SCOTUS basically said, yep, you need to apply it to that Amish case. Our case, we had an interesting brief in our case, or I'm going to say a blip that was very much in our favor, and that was there was another religious exemption case in California that was about a month ahead of ours, and that ruling was against them as well, being dismissed in the lower courts. But our judge actually let us brief on that ruling. So we got to respond as to why that ruling was incorrect, and gave us sort of another point of when we could put, the religious, the Mahmoud case and the Miller case had come down already. And so we were actually able to incorporate them into our case and therefore into our appeals case. And so that's a really strong place to be in, because we have all of this information in our case. So as we're waiting to hear from we have oral argument at some point between March and May, probably in April, on this case. And as we're waiting for that, the options really are that they say, yep, the dismissal is correct, in which case it'll go up to SCOTUS, and we expect the same ruling to be put down, saying you need to consider Mahmoud. Or if the Ninth Circuit actually has read that, which we know they have, they'll look at it and they will apply Mahmoud to our case, which would mean that we really have a much stronger case, and therefore we may get a religious exemption. I think if there is any time to get a religious exemption in California for this, it is now. We are in the prime position, and if we can't get it now, honestly, I just don't think we ever will be. I'm not wanting to put a downer, but I really am hopeful that this is the time, the place, and that we've got the lawsuit in exactly the right place at the right time. So I'm excited about it. I'm really hoping this year brings something.
So, Christina, you said that there should be oral arguments sometime between March and May this spring. Please keep us updated as to what's happening.
We will.
That we'd really like to know and be able to get and break news about that. There's a number of cases right now, because of what Miller v. McDonald has done, that are now positioned to potentially bring back a religious exemption to one state, which would effectively, most likely, bring it back to the fore 5 states that don't happen. Have it. I have one more question before we close out on this segment. The Religious Liberty Commission is writing a report in May to the Trump administration, making recommendations about what they think the Trump administration should do. Representative Stuby has the GRACE Act, which is legislation that would put funding linked to, if you were following federal law, following the First Amendment and providing a religious exemption. Stuby has also written a letter with Congress members asking for the DOJ to investigate, to intervene into cases, specifically into some children's health defense cases. And recently, Representative Stuby and now Representative Boebert, this just happened yesterday, wrote a letter. So we have 2 letters now to President Trump requesting executive action, requesting that he consider an executive order. So having said all of that, Christina, why don't you talk to us about what you think the recommendations should be to the Religious Liberty Commission? What recommendations would you make, and what do you hope comes out of that?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, because we went on stage afterwards, after the Religious Liberty Commission, and talked to a few of the commissioners. And one of them said, we have to come up with the laundry list there are 7 religious liberty hearings, and we have to come up with the recommendations from all across those. And they covered a plethora of different topics. And so they said, we were talking about our specific topic, and one of the recommendations that they are going to try to have is that the DOJ put in a letter or amicus brief on the different cases that have come up that are arguing religious liberty for school vaccine mandates. And we're excited that there are quite a few, there are 3 or 4 different cases in different states, because one of the things, if these come to SCOTUS, one of the things SCOTUS looks for is that it is something that there are multiple cases that are bringing it up, because SCOTUS only listens or only hears 5% of the cases. So we're really hopeful that the more momentum there is, and if the DOJ gets involved in this from a positive aspect, similar to the letter that Stuby wrote, asking for them to do that, that's one option. I think the other option, which is probably a little less likely, is that some sort of funding cuts happen or withdrawal of funding for any public schools that don't allow a religious exemption. That I feel like we would have seen it by now, but maybe that comes out of this as a recommendation. But we're excited to see what they do recommend. I do think it's an important topic. I think the commission recognized how important a topic this is. So hopeful that there are positive recommendations that come out of it.
Lastly, Karen, to you as a mom, fighting for this, being in the midst of it, being asked to choose between education of your child and the faith of yourself and family, it's such a tough thing. What do you have to say to other moms, other families that are going through this right now? What would you like to leave them with? Because I'm sure there's hundreds, probably thousands of parents watching right now in the exact same situation as you. As we close out this segment, what message would you like to leave them with?
I would like to let them know to keep the good faith and keep praying. We are seeing God moving through our nation and the Religious Liberty Commission. And there are great organizations like A Voice for Choice Advocacy and CHD continuing to advocate for all of our children. And one day we will see them walk into that school without being scared that we have to choose between our faith and vaccination.
Fantastic. Karen, Amigon, and Christina Hildebrand, thank you so much for the amazing work that you did. Thank you for what you were able to bring to the Religious Liberty Commission. You certainly had an impact and helped to move the needle. We'll be sure to have you back on the show sometime very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
What a moment. This is a really important moment that goes for California back to 2016, back a decade. Right, that their religious liberty was denied and taken away from them. In New York, 2019, it happened to us. 2019, 2020, that it happened to Maine. West Virginia has its own battles that are going on. And here we are in this moment where really we could see a historical civil rights restoration unlike anything that I've seen in my lifetime. So everybody, please pray. Please pray now. Please pray for the wisdom of the Religious Liberty Commission. Please pray for the wisdom of the Trump administration, and please pray for the unknown. There are powers, as my guest said, there are powers at play here way beyond us, and we don't know what is going to happen or why it's going to happen. But just prayer that God is using us in the proper way, and God is using us for the greatest possible outcome. Thank you all so much for being here. Oh, and we have one more segment up here on the show, so don't go anywhere. We're going to that right now.
Well, welcome to the show. And with that type of introduction, that type of introductory clip, we've got to get right to our guest. I want to waste absolutely no time in getting you to listen directly to Arnah Reads. Arnah, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's my absolute privilege and honor. I'm so glad to be here with you. I've learned a ton of scientific things from you over the years I've been following CHD.
Never, ever discount one of the most powerful forces in the universe, and that is the power of mom. There's nothing that Mama Bear will not do for their child. If you see a child in pain, if you see a child suffering, and I think you and your journey, you're one of the most ultimate examples I think I've ever met. So could you start by telling your story?
Sure. So the video gave a brief glimpse of that story, but I have a lot to say that I can contribute toward my husband's part in this journey as well. He's been with me every step of the way, and I can't thank God enough for that. So my hat is also off to him as well. But But yes, our daughter was tragically diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at age 2. This was shortly following her vaccinations. And we just saw so much that was declining in her health, but we didn't have any clue what it was. So we didn't know it was diabetes. We just knew that she was losing weight. She was always thirsty, and all the classic symptoms that go along with type 1 diabetes. And finally, she was diagnosed almost at the point of death. Her blood sugar was 15.2 A1C at that time of diagnosis. It was over 650 milligrams per deciliter, which is, almost death, because it had obviously been that high during the time that we hadn't known it was type 1 and she was not receiving the insulin yet. So we almost lost her. It was, thank God that she got to the hospital in time and was correctly diagnosed. But anyway, after that, like the video said, I started searching everywhere because we were doing what the doctors traditionally say to do: keep feeding the child what they've always eaten. So we were giving her the normal American diet, which is high sugars, high carbohydrates, all kinds of healthy things like fruits, which are maybe healthy for most people, but not for a child with diabetes. These are things that we were struggling with because we would see her blood sugars daily were hitting over 200s. Sometimes they'd be 300, sometimes 400. And we didn't know what to do. And I was just desperate.
What's a good baseline glucose reading in comparison?
Thank you for asking that. So yes, a non-diabetic blood sugar would be anywhere from about 80 to 90, 100, somewhere in there.
Okay. So, and you're saying that when you took her to the hospital, she was at 600, which basically you could take her blood and just pour it over a snow cone. That's a lot of sugar.
A lot of sugar. And your body cannot metabolize anything you're eating at that level of glucose. So the glucose is no longer able to give a person energy when they're at that level. They enter into something very deadly called ketoacidosis, where their blood becomes more acidic than it should be. And they basically just die over a matter of days. So she was so weak, she couldn't even walk. She would just get up to walk and then fall over. I mean, that's what we were dealing with.
Take us a little bit through the journey of then, what it took to change her diet, and also, helping her so she could, 2-year-olds have strong wills. And so she's changing her diet. She's changing what she was eating. What was that like?
Well, I think actually it's easier to change the diet of a young child than it is for an older child.
Okay.
At least in my opinion. For us, I just basically, at the time that I realized that food could actually give hope to this situation and could be something that would potentially lower her blood sugars naturally and allow us to give even less insulin, which is less dangerous if you're having less insulin. I just remember I stood in the kitchen, I started opening cabinets, and I just looked at the food. I started just throwing food away. Just, this is not good for her, in the trash. This is not. And I just started eliminating. And some of it was very emotional. I'm not just saying that this was an easy thing. Right. I knew these are things my child loves to eat. And as a mom, that is very painful to know that I'm not going to be able to give her what she loves. But I did it because I know it's going to be for her good in the long run. It's going to help her to live. So I care more about her life than about her having a happy meal. Right. So this is what was driving me to do that. But I remember that day I just stood there. I opened the cabinets and it was just, the trash can is right here. Here it goes. The sugar in the can. And we just basically eliminated everything out of the house that was going to cause her harm. Personally, my child. And I'm not saying everyone has to do this, but that's what I did. And it dramatically reduced the temptation Is when she was having those, at the table fits, or, oh, I want the, whatever it was.
Right.
Then I could say, well, I'm sorry, we don't have that. And that was the truth. I wasn't lying to her. It wasn't hidden away in some cabinet. I really didn't have it. So what was she going to do? Like go out to Walmart herself and get it? No,
take her big wheel to Walmart. Right.
So after a few days, weeks, children get used to the new norm. This is a wonderful, beautiful thing about children. They really are quite resilient with food, and they really can adjust to what a parent decides is the new thing on the table.
Mm-hmm. How did that look? What did that look like for her? What were the foods that you transitioned to, and how long of a journey? Now she's no longer a type 1 diabetic. I get that much. Is she still insulin dependent, or is she? Where are you in that journey? If I can ask.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, because that is important to note here. Yes, her blood sugars have decreased significantly. Her blood sugar has gone into a non-diabetic range.
Congratulations. That's great.
Thank you. But as far as I know at this point, type 1 diabetes being an autoimmune condition and being different than type 2, which is mostly metabolic in nature and can be reversed. Type 1, as far as I've known, has never been able to be reversed, even through food. So
that makes good sense. Yes.
Right. So the food piece has helped her be healthy. It's helped her blood sugar be normal. But she still has the autoimmune aspect inside of her, that raging battle that we know about, the immune system attacking the actual beta cells in her pancreas. And those cells will no longer be able to function because they're just not there.
Right.
They have died. So
yeah, you can't make new islets to make insulin. No, absolutely.
Exactly.
That makes perfect sense to me. And so then to normalize her blood glucose levels, from where you started when she was 2 years of age and almost passed away, how long was that process?
It's a learning curve, because when parents are used to a certain way of eating, it doesn't happen overnight. And so I say this to my clients as well now. Whenever you make a change like that, don't expect the A1C to come down next week. It usually takes 3 to 6 months to see a glucose go down to normal. For us, it took, I don't have the charts right here in front of me. I have it all mapped out in my notes somewhere else. But I think for us, it took about 6 months for her to get down.
That's wonderful.
Into the 6 range, and then about 9 to 12 months to see it go down to the 5s. So
Incredible.
Right now she's at about 5.5, 5.6, somewhere in there. Yeah.
Well, and that's normal for A1C. I mean, when I talk to patients that have type 2 diabetes and they're trying to correct that, manage it with diet and exercise, once they get between 5 and 6, that's like backflip time. That is a very, very solid number for A1C. So congratulations for that. And then what type of in the journey, and if I'm interrupting and asking more questions and you want to just go on and tell your story, please let me know. But I'm nerding out on this, quite frankly.
That's fine.
So what type of things did you monitor? Besides blood glucose and A1C, did you do any other types of run-ups to see how she was responding to different foods, or how did that work?
Well, at first she was using needles for the first couple of weeks, and I praise God that she was able to get onto a glucose monitor on the arm pretty soon after she was diagnosed. So thank God we didn't have to do needles too long with her.
Oh, those finger pricks are the worst, aren't they?
Yes, not just finger pricks to know what the blood sugar is, but the actual injection of the insulin has to happen before each meal. And therefore, for a young child, that is extremely traumatic. So we'd have to inject her arm or her thigh before each meal. And thereafter, each time her blood sugar went high, she could have had at least 7 needles in one day.
Okay.
So just take that in, like for a 2-year-old. So we would literally have to hold her down because she was screaming, you know, like, and so the trauma. So this is why I sometimes tell people that are upset about her wearing a CGM on her arm. They don't like the Bluetooth, and they tell me it's not natural. And I agree with that. It's not natural. I don't like the fact that she's wearing a Bluetooth device. But for a child who has had that kind of trauma, it keeps her from having to have those needles all throughout the day and every night.
Right.
Yeah.
We
I
are
kind of
more concerned with her health than what's quote unquote natural at
Yes,
this.
yes.
So, no, I so appreciate that. Yes, go ahead.
I remember what your question was now. I was sharing that as a backdrop for answering the question that you asked about what we had tracked. So, number one, we had to track her glucose very, very closely. And every time we would give her something that was, maybe it said on the package, sugar-free, but then her glucose would spike up anyway. That was kind of like a training for us to know what is truly sugar-free and when are they sneaking hidden sugars in there. We learned about things like maltodextrin, which is practically another word for sugar. It's a fake sugar, basically, a starch that the FDA has basically renamed starch instead of sugar. I personally think it should be called a sugar because it acts just like sugar, and it's higher on the, as far as I know, it's higher on the scale than table sugar is. So
it makes perfect sense because, you know, all of those, it starts out as a starch, which is polysaccharide, and then it breaks down. It becomes sugar in the system. It becomes, you know, so even starch is just many units of sugar. So no, that makes perfect sense. I'm glad you pointed that out because people tend to associate like, oh, it must be sucrose or glucose, but no, there are so many things in processed foods that are sugars or become sugar when they hit the body.
Right. Very well said. So we would see that we would try to give her some things and think that it was going to be good, you know, rice or pasta, these kinds of starches, and none of it was good. So we had to find alternatives because for a type 1 diabetic, that spikes blood glucose very, very quickly. Things like pizza, it would have the crust made out of wheat flour. And of course, the flour is going to break down into starch and act just like sugar, along with the fat, which keeps the sugar at a constant. So that was one of the worst foods for her because it would take the sugar up and keep it up for maybe 4 hours. It was incredible.
Interesting. So the fat would actually sustain the glucose level.
Sustain, right.
Okay.
And so that was a dramatic learning curve for us. Like, yes. So this was it was a beautiful thing, though, to see how God has made our bodies to heal. He's made our bodies to fight disease. And I was seeing that with my own eyes, that, you know, even when a child has an autoimmune condition, when you give them the things that are actually nourishing for their body, they can see a dramatic improvement. And so this is why I started Eat for Health, because I wanted other parents to have this kind of hope. Everyone's not going to get a 100% reversal. Okay, like you were saying, does she still have type 1? Yes, she still has it. But is it dramatically better? Yes. Does she have less chance of neuropathy, you know, amputation, going blind, liver disease, heart disease, you know, all these things that diabetics so often face and at a young age.
Right.
Dramatically decreases the chances of these. So that's why I created Eat for Health as a business to help other parents and other individuals, couples, families.
It's so great what you're doing, Arnah, with Eat for Health. And, you know, it applies. One of the things that you pointed out that you know, I really want to emphasize is the amount of care that's required for a diabetic in that situation. It's not like, you know, and I think that, you know, watching too much primetime television and seeing commercials for, you know, the A1C inhibitors and the and you know, a pill for every ill, but really, I mean, doing the work, changing the diet, it makes so much of a difference for things like microcirculatory disease, as you were pointing out, and knowing, you know, I had one of my dearest friends ever. She was like a mom to me. Had diabetic neuropathy. She ended up having part of her foot amputated later on in life, and you just do not want to see anybody have to go through that.
No, that's horrible. Yes, and I've seen that happen to dear friends and family members of, you know, in our own circles, and it is heartbreaking. And my heart really goes out to these people, because a lot of times in fact, in most circumstances, people are doing what they believe to be best. The doctor has said, do such and such and such, and they do it. Then the doctor changes the pill or changes the insulin or changes the medication. They get on a whatever. And it just goes down a slippery slope toward more and more illness, more and more side effects, more and more. You know, we don't know the etiology of every single disease, but we certainly know that a pill is not always going to fix things, and usually does not. And in fact, can make more side effects. Most people don't even stop to read all the inserts in their pills. How does that pill work with this one? You know, certain medications have terrible side effects if you put them together. And a lot of people I know are on more than 5 or 6 or 7 of them. The children, you know, this is children's health defense. The children out there who are suffering from chronic illnesses and diseases are often put on so many medications. And my heart just goes out to the parents, as the parents see this happening and they just don't know what to do.
You know, I can't help but think about the American Academy of Pediatrics, their recommendation for children that had insulin resistance and overweight going on GLP-1 inhibitors or GLP-1 agonists. Why don't we do diet and exercise? Why don't we look at what they're eating? And so I'm so thankful that you're doing that. You have an entire program. Tell us a little bit more about eatperhealth.us, the program, and how you're serving other individuals that are on their own journey regarding their diets.
Yes, so thank you for that. So what I had experienced with our daughter really inspired me to start this. And then it's been such a privilege to see people actually go through their own journey. What I did not want to do is do exactly the same thing that we had done for our daughter to everyone else, like a cookie cutter approach. It is far from that. So what I do is personalized, individualized with every single client. And so every single person that comes to me, I interview them first with a 20-minute free health call where we go over what they, you know, what are their concerns, what do they want, what are their medications they're on, or allergies, these kinds of things that make them who they are, or their child who they are. And then from there, I can make a plan for them, because my child's plan is not going to be their plan. They don't have my child's body. So I need to know, what do they you know, all these different things. And it really has been inspiring to see the improvements, you know. So I was talking to a mom. She's not my client particularly, but I was talking to a mom the other day at church, and she was telling me how her child that she had seen that was close to being on the spectrum. He wasn't diagnosed, but she believed that he was on the spectrum. And one day he probably would have been diagnosed as autistic. So she just started searching around and searching around. She found the gluten-free casein diet, and she wrote a beautiful thing. I copied it into my notes so I could read it to you if you want to hear that.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, because I know a lot of the listeners on this call have autistic children, so I thought this was very appropriate.
Guilty. Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, so she says here, I recognized from very early on that something was definitely off with my boy. As I think about him and those early years, one word comes to my mind: frustrated. He always seemed frustrated. For several years, I struggled with how to help my son. I suspected he was on the spectrum. All his symptoms pointed toward Asperger's. He struggled to put thoughts together, and often, if you did not have the context, you didn't know what he was talking about. In addition to this, he struggled to focus, which made school a struggle. His doctor was always telling me he was on the low end of normal. Okay, but how do I help him? Was always the question nagging me. And then the fits. Oh my, the fits. They started early and lasted well beyond the age-appropriate years. I remember trying to cut his toenails one day and him going into a full-on meltdown. It was awful. The smallest things would set him off, and it was impossible to reason with him. And then she says something really key here. She said, I noticed that the fits were worse after his grandparents would visit. And this was not because of the grandparents, I'll say here.
Right.
They love to bring all sorts of treats, chips, ice cream, hot dogs, cookies, all kinds of things here. You get the idea. I began to dread their visits because of the week that followed, awful fits and meltdowns where he would take out his frustration on me and his brothers. So she says here, I devoured books and podcasts. I now had 2 other boys, and their development highlighted the areas my oldest son was struggling. I knew I had to do something for him. And in my research, for the first time, I was introduced to the concept of the biology of behavior and how certain foods can cause the behaviors I was seeing. So I found a doctor who believed in taking a biomedical approach to helping children like my son, and my mind was blown. So many disorders are directly linked to modern environmental and biological stressors that cause neurological deficiencies, immune problems, and gut issues. I began focusing on nutritional therapy, supplements, detoxification, and targeted treatments. She says the doctor put her on a gluten-free and dairy-free diet, and her son began supplements also targeting his brain and gut health. They did testing, and his doctor found that his son also had yeast overgrowth called candida, so that was dealt with also.
We've seen that with my own son. If you want your thrush to bloom, then feed it some, nice sucrose. Exactly.
Right. So they're doing gluten-free and dairy-free. So she said within weeks, we saw our son's behaviors begin to regulate. We were able to reason with him. He began to communicate why he was frustrated. She says here, for years, the piece that was missing was nutrition. I am forever grateful that the Lord heard my prayers by providing a doctor that helped me implement all the key components, especially nutrition. That really just, that's not my client, so I'm not like singing my praises here. This is praise to God for the different doctors.
Well, I'm so thankful for that testimony, and really, it's good to have a practitioner. It's also good to have a coach. I want to encourage people to check out your website, eatforhealth.us, and you give a free 20-minute consult. I felt like I kind of got the free 20-minute consult the first time that we met. But it is worth investing that time. Food is medicine. It's even a current theme within Make America Healthy Again with Secretary Kennedy and the HHS. Let's clean up our diets. And so, Arnah, again, so eatforhealth.us, are there other places that people can follow you in your work? Are there other resources that they can get off of your website?
Yes. So they have to go to eatforhealth.us and look for the tab that says free call. They can also find me on Facebook under Eat for Health LLC.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your daughter's story and the story of this young boy that was on the spectrum. And thank you also just for the work that you do, for giving back and for helping others.
Thank you. It's a privilege.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us this important episode of Doctors and Scientists. Take the fork, pick up the food, look at what you're eating, make sure that you are eating the best that you can possibly eat, and have a great Friday.
We are live. Tell everyone your name, please.
Jennifer Sharp.
And tell everyone the movie that you made.
I made the movie Anecdotals.
And just before we get into it, tell people what that's about.
It's about anecdotes, which is all of us who've been vaccine injured. And when we try to tell our story or try to say, hey, I was injured, this happened to me, the common response we get is, oh, well, that's just an anecdote. So sorry, but like it doesn't prove scientifically that you were injured or that it's that dangerous. So because we're all anecdotes and we've all been told that, I made a movie called Anecdotals.
Okay, so when we end this interview, we'll tell everyone where to go. Now, let's go back and talk about why you got to the place where you had to make a movie about an injury. So what happened to you? What vaccine did you get? Why did you take it?
Okay, I got the Pfizer vaccine, March 2021. I worked at the YMCA. And that's around kids. It's a health thing, children. So we were really early on the list to get vaccinated. And my boss called they made appointment times, and I was called, and I was like, my time was up, and I didn't know what to do, and I actually did some research on it and found some bad things about it. I found the Van der Bosch interview before I took it, because everybody in my world's pro-vax. Everything was saying it's good. Every doctor on my Facebook feed and YouTube feed was like, this is great technology, and this is why it was fast, and it's true. And I have one friend who's anti-vax and has been, and I just said, please send me some stuff, because there's nothing on my feed telling me anything bad. The only bad thing I found was that the Van der Bosch interview, which was like 2.5 hours, and it was very interesting. But what I got from that interview was that the vaccine's not going to work, and you should never vaccinate during a pandemic. And so I didn't really think about injuries. Like, that really wasn't on my mind. It was like, is this going to work? Is this too quick? Is it a stupid vaccine? And I wasn't sure. So when I got my Pfizer shot, I wasn't excited. I was nervous, but I was like, well, it doesn't seem like this is going to work, but I'm going to do it. And then the injuries happened, and that wasn't really on my mind. I hadn't even thought about that part.
So after the first Pfizer, the injury happened?
Yeah.
Did you have two?
One.
Just one. That's all you had?
Just
Fine.
one.
So tell us, first of all, where did you go and get it?
I went to USC Keck School of Medicine.
And did they tell you before they gave it to you, they asked you any medical history or anything?
Not only did they not ask me anything, they called me 3 weeks later to get my second shot. And I said, great, you're calling me, because I've been calling the NIH and Pfizer and nobody's getting back to me. And since the shot, I haven't been able to feel the left side of my face. My left arm is tingling. My legs were swollen for 2 weeks. I said, I'm feeling a little better now. It was starting to go away. I said, but my jaw is still numb. And I'm telling the person on the phone, the nurse who was calling me, and I said, so great, this is what happened after I went and took my shot. So can you tell me what's going on? And are you recommending I get a second shot? And the person from USC Keck School of Medicine said, we don't answer those questions. We can't answer those questions. We're just calling you to get vaccinated. And I was like, okay, you want to put this in? And I was challenging her, and she was like, sorry, I don't have any answers. Go talk to your primary care physician. And then I'm like, so then why are you calling me and asking me to get a second shot when you're not prepared to talk to me after you already put this in me? And she's like, I'm sorry, I'll leave a message for a nurse or a doctor and see if anybody knows anything. Never heard from them, except for another 3 weeks later when they kept calling me to get my second shot.
And what about your doctor or anything like that? When you said, look at my injuries.
Yeah.
And do carry on talking about your injuries.
Yeah, so my injuries, luckily, I'm mild. I mean, that's why I was able to make a film, because I still have lingering stuff, but it's paresthesia. I don't know if that's lucky, because I don't know what damage is being done inside, but at least I'm able to focus on things. So I went to doctors. I didn't have health insurance. I had really bad emergency health insurance. But I had started going to a whole health doctor. So I went to my whole health doctor, which you pay cash for, and she was like, yes, these are neurological injuries. I've been seeing a lot of them. And she's telling me all this stuff. And she's telling me what you can do, and she starts prescribing like glutathione and things to do, and she's very sympathetic, and it was great. And then I had my job called, another job I had, who said I needed to get vaccinated. So I called my doctor to ask for an exemption for my vaccine injury, and she knew it. She'd been treating me, and she sent me an email and was like, I don't give exemptions. And so then I wrote her a mad email, and I'm like, if I don't get this job, it's because of you. You are the only doctor I have seen. You're the only one who has anything on record that I have a vaccine injury. I can't go to like my primary care and ask for it because I haven't seen anybody. And we went back and forth, and finally she called me at home. She stopped the email stuff. She was crying. And she said, I am so sorry, but it's a really hard time for doctors right now, and we have to make decisions whether we want to help patients or stand up for what's going on. And I've made the decision that I can do the most help by helping patients and having a practice. So I'm not doing anything to put myself a red flag. I'm trying to help the patients and be available. So for that reason, no exemptions. I'm not going to report your case to VAERS. I don't report vaccine injuries, and I don't give exemptions. So I had a doctor who was understanding and caring, and still couldn't, I still almost lost a job because of it. And then I fought the job and got a different doctor to write me an exemption, a naturopath, and finally I got to keep the job. But
that's horrific.
Yeah.
The doctor couldn't do that.
Yeah, and it's California, which is one of the worst. So, and then of course I was so appalled, and everybody's like, oh my God. So I went to my vaccine injured support group on Facebook, and I was like, this is what my doctor said, and I was so angry. And everybody replied, oh yeah, mine said the same thing. Yeah, I can't get an exemption. We can't get exemptions. Oh, but the other thing my doctor did was she sent me a religious faith medical exemption form. And she was like, this is what I can do. Why don't you go this way?
And did you get one?
No, because no.
California.
Yeah, and I didn't try. I didn't do the religious. That just seemed, it was just like whatever. But I got, I went to a different doctor, and she's a naturopath. She's actually in the movie, Dr. Korji. Fearless, because when I made anecdotals, I was like, I can't just have vaccine injured. I have to talk to a doctor. But I was like, there's no doctor that's going to be willing to be in my movie, like who's on the side of us and understanding. But I just contacted Dr. Korji, and I said, would you be willing to be interviewed for my movie? And she was like, yes, 100%. She's fearless. And that's just, so she's the doctor in my movie, and she's also the one who gave me an exemption.
All right. So what else? So you're injured, and you go on as you decide to make a movie. How did you go and find? How did the process go to go and find other people that were injured too? So first of all, we have huge support groups on Facebook. There's thousands and thousands of us.
Those that are still on Facebook.
Yeah. So those that, until it gets taken down. I had like 3 different groups, and you have to see which one's taken down. But we've all gotten really good at putting V, P, C, M, like there's codes. We don't say the words, and then we don't get taken down. So I first of all just reached out to Facebook and there are people who've had tragic stories, and I reached out to them. And a lot of them were like, no, sorry. One guy called me, and I really wanted to talk to him, and he said, I haven't worked for a year or 8 months, and I'm on my couch, and I'm finally starting to feel a little better, and I'm going to start applying for jobs again, and I can't have any controversy around me. I don't want any reason to not get a job, so I can't talk about this. And so there was a lot of that. So the people who are in my movie are the people who were brave enough or ready to talk about it through the vaccine injured, through my support groups, and then reaching out to React 19, Bree Dressen was a huge help. As soon as she heard I was making a movie, she was telling people about it, and she invited me to the anti-mandate rally. I was going, but she was like, hey, I was in their hotel block. I was part of everybody, so I got a lot of people there and just started to get a lot of support.
And you did this on your own. You didn't have any funding, really.
I had no funding. I'll tell you, I got some, but when I started, I was no. So I'm a filmmaker. I've been a filmmaker for my whole life, so I know what I'm doing. And I just thought, okay, I'm just gonna tell this story, and it's gonna be cheap. Like I'm gonna do Zoom interviews, but then I was just like, I need a couple in-person interviews. I need some stuff. So once I decided to go forward, I reached out to someone who said he would help me, Josh Stileman, and I'd met him, whatever. And he's like, if you ever make a movie, I'll help you. And I didn't know what that meant. And so I reached back to him, and I said, I want to do one in-person filming, and I need to hire a crew, 2 people. Just 2 people on my crew, really small. But I was like, I need this money. I need to pay some people and get some equipment. And he was like, I'll cover it. So he covered that in an interview, went forward. Once I cut that together, I got a few more things I wanted to do. And I found a few more people who just reached out to me along the way and were like, this is so cool what you're doing. And so when I needed money, I reached out to people just to cover expenses, and that was how I could get the production value a little higher. And then everything else I just did. I edited it, I color corrected it, I did it all myself in my living room.
So talented, and it's such a brilliant film. So tell everyone where they can go and see it.
You can see the movie at anecdotalsmovie.com, the website, which is anecdotals with an S, movie.com. It's also on YouTube. It's the same link, and that's an amazing thing. We are kicked off of YouTube, but we are on it again. So watch it, share it. There's no commercials. I made that extremely important, that it's easy to share. And I ask people, the goal of this movie is to tell our stories and to open people's eyes. So I made it very gentle, so that the people who are kind of still pro-vax or don't really understand, who are able to be open-minded, some aren't, just not, but those people who might listen, share it with them, because I've had a lot of success with people saying, oh my God, I had no idea until I saw your movie. Thank you. And I've even had people saying, wow, now I'm second guessing if I should get my booster. And so I'm making people think, this movie makes people think, it doesn't shame them. And that's the goal of this specific movie.
Is there anything else you want to tell the people?
No, I'll just say it's been a really crazy ride making this movie, and I'm in a world where I see there's two different worlds happening right now, and I've been here in Arizona showing the movie, and that's been amazing, and then I go home to my family, like we're kind of on this vacation, because they came because I was here and it was my birthday, whatever, and they don't want to talk about it. And so they're talking about how crazy this world is, and then I come here and everybody here is talking about how crazy they are, and I'm hearing both, and I'm trying to talk to both. And I mean, the thing about this world, about the vaccine injury, is just that a lot of us have been there, and so we understand the shift. The people who are still very adamant that the vaccines are good, and people are, I had my uncle tell me yesterday that people are still morons if they don't get vaccinated, and that was the night before my screening, and I was like, so I guess none of you guys are coming to my screening in Phoenix. And they were like, oh, did you ever think that was a possibility?
Wow.
So that's what I've been going through.
The one sitting in the back?
No, so that was my brother and sister. And then we went to my aunt and uncle's house. And so, but they are all, my brother and sister weren't that bad, and they did come to my screening, but they definitely didn't come to the second one.
And they only stayed at the back.
And they
did not proceed forward.
Yeah, it was, they were there, and
What an interesting situation to be in.
Yes.
Whatever it is, know you're very much loved by both sides, there's that. And thank you. We look forward to more films. You got any more films coming down?
No, not yet. I have some ideas and thoughts, but I'm still so immersed in this world that there will be more films. So definitely watch out. Jennifer Sharp Films is my filmmaker Instagram, but Anecdotal's Movie is Instagram, Twitter, and website for following the movie.
Brilliant. And you're feeling better today?
Yeah. Physically or emotionally. It's good. And my injury comes and goes, it just stings, and so it's totally livable. I feel lucky.
Oh, you're an amazing human. Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.